The stench of antiseptic clung to Maya Torres like a second skin, a ghost of the 16-hour shift that had just ended. It was in her hair, under her fingernails, a constant reminder of the controlled chaos of the ER. Her shoes, once white, squeaked a rhythm of exhaustion on the linoleum as she finally pushed through the hospital doors into the pre-dawn gloom. The air outside wasn't fresh, it was thick, heavy, and saturated with the promise of more rain. The storm had been lashing the city of Port Blossom for 2 days, a relentless, weeping sky that was starting to feel personal. Her drive home was a blur of slick asphalt and pulsing red taillights. Her small rented house sagged under the weight of the deluge, the gutters overflowing in miniature waterfalls. Inside, the only greeting was a frantic tail thump against a crate. Buster, a scruffy terrier mix with one floppy ear and eyes full of boundless love, was her anchor in the swirling vortex of her life. She let him out of the crate, and he immediately nudged his head into her hand. For a moment, leaning against the cool metal of the front door, she allowed herself to feel the simple, uncomplicated joy of his presence. It was the only thing in her life that wasn't complicated. Then she saw it, the pile on the kitchen counter. A stack of envelopes, each one a paper cut to her soul. She didn't need to open them to know what they were. The logos were seared into her memory. A stylized eagle for the Federal Student Loan Servicer, the sterile blue cross of the hospital's billing department, the bold, accusatory font of the credit card company. On top, one lay starkly white against the others, its window revealing a blood-red stamp, Final Notice. Her fingers, numb from fatigue, fumbled with the cheap paper. Your account, reference 74B 912, for the outstanding medical debts of Eleanor Torres, remains severely delinquent and further inaction will result in referral to our External Collections Division, her mother's name. A name that brought a warmth to her heart and a crushing physical weight to her chest. The cancer had taken her mother, and the cost of fighting it was now trying to take what little was left of Maya. She dropped the letter. The total was a number so vast it felt abstract. A cruel joke. Over $100,000 in student loans for her nursing degree, another $60,000 from her mother's failed treatments. She worked a life-saving job, yet she was drowning. She was a healer who couldn't heal her own finances. Collapsing onto her worn-out sofa, Maya pulled a threadbare blanket over herself, the rhythmic drumming of the rain a maddening lullaby. Buster hopped up, resting his chin on her chest, his warm breath a small comfort. She closed her eyes, praying for a few hours of dreamless sleep before the hospital inevitably called her in again. Just a few hours of quiet. That's when the sound tore through the house. Not the thunder, but a shrill alien shriek. Her phone. An emergency alert, the screen glowing with a terrifying red banner. Flash flood warning. Catastrophic flooding imminent. Evacuate low-lying areas immediately. Her street, thankfully, was on a slight incline, a small island in the descending geography of the neighborhood. But the areas below, the ones closer to the river, were in mortal danger. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by the familiar, cold rush of adrenaline. She went to the window and gasped. The street at the bottom of her hill was no longer a street. It was a churning, brown river, swallowing cars and climbing the front steps of the houses. Her phone buzzed again, not with an alert, but with a notification from the town's community social media page. The post was frantic, riddled with typos. Please somebody, help my Charlie has trapped in the house on Riverbend Street. The water came so fast I got out, but I couldn't get him. He's a beagle. Brown and white. Please somebody. The rescue line is busy. The post was from a user named Frankiedy2. Maya knew Riverbend Street. It was completely submerged. She tried calling 911, just as Frank must have. A recorded voice. All circuits are busy. Please stay on the line. Stay on the line. While a dog was trapped in a flooding house, she looked at Buster, who was watching her with intelligent, concerned eyes. She thought of her mother, who always said that doing nothing when you could do something was the only real sin. I can't, she whispered to herself. I'm not a first responder. I'm just a nurse. I'm so tired. But the image of a terrified beagle, alone as the water rose, clawed at her conscience. She thought about the weight on her chest, the pile of bills, the feeling of being utterly powerless. Maybe she couldn't fight the banks. Maybe she couldn't fix her debt. But she could do this. She could do something. Okay, Buster, she said, her voice finding a resolve she didn't know she had. Looks like we're not getting any sleep. Without another moment of hesitation, She pulled on her sturdiest waterproof boots, grabbed the old life vest from the back of her hall closet, and stuffed a Ziploc bag with essentials from her medical kit: gauze, antiseptic wipes, sterile saline. She waded out her front door into the storm. The water at the bottom of her hill was already waist deep, a cold, insistent tide pulling at her. She pushed against it, her target the small blue house Frank had described, its porch light flickering weakly beneath the churning surface. She broke a window with a rock she found, the sound of shattering glass swallowed by the storm's roar. She pulled herself through, the frigid water shocking her system. The living room was a nightmare of floating furniture and swirling debris. And then she heard a terrified, high-pitched whimpering from upstairs. She found him on the landing, shivering, his paws submerged in the encroaching water. It was Charlie, a beautiful beagle with soulful eyes wide with terror. She scooped him into her arms, his small body trembling violently against hers. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, her voice a shield against the chaos. "It's okay. I've got you." She carried him back through the treacherous water, his weight both a burden and a strange sort of ballast. When she finally stumbled back into her own garage, soaked, shivering, and bleeding from a cut on her arm, she placed the grateful dog on a pile of old blankets. He immediately began licking her hand, a silent, profound thank you. Maya posted a quick reply to Frank82's post. "Charlie is safe. He's with me at my house, 412 Oak Crest Drive. He's warm and dry." The act of saving one animal, of imposing a single point of order on the overwhelming chaos, should have been the end, but it was only the beginning. Her reply, along with a picture of the shivering but safe beagle, was shared, then shared again. Within minutes, her phone, which had been a source of dread, became a lifeline for the desperate. "My 2 cats are on the 2nd floor of 119 Willow Creek. The power is out, I can't get back. There's a German Shepherd tied up in a yard on Hemlock Lane. The water is getting close to him. Does anyone know what's happening with the animals at the Port Blossom Pet Shelter? It's right by the river." The official channels were broken. The system was failing. But Maya Torres, ER nurse, drowning in debt, was here, and she had a 2-car garage. With a deep breath that did little to calm her racing heart, she began clearing it out, pushing aside lawnmowers and dusty boxes. Her makeshift ark was now open for business. The longest 72 hours of her life had just begun. The first 24 hours were a blur of adrenaline, rain, and fur. Maya operated in a state of heightened awareness she normally only felt during a code blue in the ER. Every decision was immediate, every action critical. Her garage transformed from a cluttered storage space into a bustling, chaotic, but functional triage center. She established a system: dry blankets in one corner for the stable and scared, a makeshift critical care unit in the other, under the harsh glare of a battery-powered work light, where she used her nursing skills to perform small miracles. She cleaned a deep gash on a golden retriever's leg, flushing it with the sterile saline from her kit and wrapping it tightly with gauze. She found a litter of 6 kittens, barely a week old, huddled in a cardboard box floating near a submerged car. They were hypothermic, their tiny bodies cold and limp. She wrapped them in towels and placed them near the warm engine of her car, which she ran for 10-minute intervals, praying the carbon monoxide wouldn't be an issue. Using a needless syringe, she gently squeezed droplets of water into their mouths until they began to stir. Word of the Oak Crest Shelter spread through the digital grapevine of the community. People started showing up. A teenager named Leo, who couldn't have been more than 17, arrived with a box of dog food and a smartphone. He never stopped pointing at things. An elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, brought a stack of old towels and a thermos of hot coffee that felt like lifeblood to Maya. A quiet man whose own home was on the verge of flooding dropped off 2 large bags of cat litter, simply saying, "Thank you," before disappearing back into the storm. They became her impromptu staff. Leo helped document the incoming animals, taking photos to post online for frantic owners. Mrs. Gable took on the role of comforter-in-chief, sitting with the most terrified animals, murmuring to them in a low, soothing voice. The rescues became a rhythmic cycle of risk and reward. She and a few other able-bodied volunteers used a neighbor's inflatable raft to navigate the flooded streets. They coaxed a terrified parrot, its feathers slick with rain, from the awning of a gas station. They rescued a terrarium of pet snakes left behind in an apartment, carefully securing them in pillowcases. Each successful mission was a shot of pure dopamine, a potent drug that masked her profound exhaustion. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of her debt was a distant hum, drowned out by the immediate, tangible purpose of a heartbeat in her hands. She was tired, yes, but she also felt more alive than ever. It was late in the afternoon of the second day when the blue and white SUV pulled up. It was clean, unnervingly so, amidst the mud and debris. A woman stepped out, dressed in a crisp, official-looking navy blue jumpsuit with a County Emergency Response Team patch on the shoulder. She held a clipboard like a weapon. Her expression was a flat line of disapproval. "I'm Brenda Hoskins, director of CART," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise of the garage. She scanned the scene, the dozens of animals, the makeshift enclosures, Leo filming her with his phone and her lips thinned into a razor's edge. "I'm Maya Torres," Maya said, wiping a smear of mud from her cheek. "We're just trying to help." "What you're doing," Brenda began, clicking her pen, "is creating an unsanctioned and hazardous operation. You have undocumented animals from multiple households in a non-quarantined environment. You have no intake logs, no proper chain of custody. This is a public health nightmare waiting to happen." Maya stared at her, bewildered. "A health nightmare? The nightmare is out there. These animals were going to drown. This cat has a broken leg. Those puppies would have frozen to death." "Oh," Brenda was unmoved. She made a check mark on her clipboard. "All animals must be transferred to the Central County facility for processing immediately. We have protocols for a reason, Miss Torres. They prevent the spread of disease and ensure every animal is accounted for in the system." "Your system?" Maya's voice rose, laced with disbelief and fatigue. "Your system's phone lines are down!" "Your central facility, which I know for a fact is already at capacity, is on the other side of a flooded highway. These animals need care now, not when they get a number in a file. Your credentials as a nurse do not qualify you to run an emergency animal shelter," Brenda said, her tone dripping with condescension. "You are a liability. I am ordering you to turn these animals over to my team." Two men in similar jumpsuits got out of the SUV and opened the rear doors, revealing a stack of sterile, empty cages. Maya felt a surge of protective fury. She looked around at the makeshift sanctuary, at the sleeping dogs and the purring cats, at the faces of Mrs. Gable and Leo, who were watching with wide, worried eyes. She stepped forward, physically placing herself between Brenda and the garage. "No," she said, her voice low and steady. "Absolutely not. You are not taking them." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "I am documenting your non-compliance," she said, her voice like ice. "This is not over. I'm advising you to cease and desist your activities. We will be back." She turned on her heel, got back into her immaculate SUV, and drove away, leaving a wake of silent fury behind her. The immediate threat was gone, but a new, colder fear began to settle in Maya's gut. She wasn't just fighting the storm anymore. Now she was fighting the system. The confrontation with Brenda left a sour taste in Maya's mouth, a lingering chill that the hot coffee couldn't touch, but there was no time to dwell on it. More animals were arriving, brought in by people who had heard she was the only place to turn. The garage was now a chaotic symphony of barks, meows, and the low hum of worried human voices. The air was thick with the smell of wet fur and disinfectant. Just as a fragile sense of order was re-emerging, a new front in her battle opened up, this one much closer to home. Mr. Henderson from next door appeared on his porch. He was a man whose lawn was his life's work, a perfect green carpet he defended with chemical precision. The flood, which had mercifully stopped just short of his prize-winning petunias, had clearly frayed his last nerve. He stood there in a pristine bathrobe, his face a mask of pinched fury, his cell phone held up, recording. "This is a disgrace!" he shouted, his voice shrill enough to make several dogs start barking again. "A public nuisance. It smells. There are health codes, you know. This is a residential area, not a zoo." "Mr. Henderson, please," Maya called out, walking to the edge of her driveway. "People's pets are in danger. This is an emergency." "Your emergency is not my problem," he retorted. "I haven't had a moment's peace in 2 days. All this racket. I'm calling the police." He disappeared back inside his house. Maya sighed, her shoulders slumping. Of all the things to worry about, hypothermia, infection, a lack of resources, Brenda Hoskins' a noise complaint seemed surreally petty. But she knew men like Henderson. They were weaponizers of rules, finding power in the fine print of bylaws and ordinances. 20 minutes later, a police car crawled up the street, its blue and red lights painting the rainy twilight in strobing flashes. A single officer, his face etched with a weariness that mirrored Maya's own, got out of the car. His name tag read, Sergeant Miller. "Ma'am," he began, his voice heavy. "I'm here about a noise complaint." Maya almost laughed. It was an absurd, hysterical sound that bubbled up from her exhausted core. "A noise complaint? Officer, are you seeing this? The city is underwater and he's complaining about barking?" She gestured vaguely towards Henderson's darkened house. Sergeant Miller looked from Maya's mud-streaked face to the garage teeming with life, then back to Henderson's perfectly manicured lawn. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, I get it. I really do. My sister's had to evacuate, and she's worried sick about her cat. What you're doing here it's a good thing." "Then why are you here?" Maya asked, her voice softer now, pleading. "Because he made a formal complaint," Miller said, his frustration evident. "And when a formal complaint is made, I have to respond. It's the procedure. I have to officially tell you that you are in violation of City Ordinance 113.8 regarding excessive noise in a residential zone." The words felt like a physical blow. Procedure. Ordinance. The same sterile, unfeeling language Brenda had used. It was the language of a world that had no room for the beautiful, messy chaos of compassion. "You're giving me a warning?" she asked, her voice cracking. "For saving them?" "Technically, yes," he said, and he had the decency to look ashamed. "Listen, off the record, keep doing what you're doing. You're a hero in my book. But on the record, I have to ask you to keep the noise down. I have to put it in my report." He gave her a small, apologetic nod and got back in his car. As he drove away, Maya looked over at Mr. Henderson's house. A curtain twitched in the window. He was watching, and she had no doubt he was pleased. The feeling of injustice was a hot, bitter bile in her throat. She was running on 3 hours of sleep in the last 48. Her body ached with a fatigue so deep it felt cellular, and she had just been officially reprimanded for trying to save lives, all because her neighbor's nap was disturbed. The rage she felt was a clean, pure flame that burned away some of the exhaustion. "Fine," she thought, a defiant spark igniting within her. "Let them come. Let them all come. I'm not stopping." The morning of the third day broke gray and grim. The rain had finally softened to a drizzle, but the water levels hadn't receded. The garage was at capacity, a living, breathing testament to the disaster. Over 70 animals were now in Maya's care. The initial adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a bone-deep weariness and the gnawing anxiety of her twin threats, Brenda's bureaucracy and Henderson's pettiness. What Maya didn't know was that a third force was entering the fray. Leo, the teenager with the smartphone, had been doing more than just documenting the animals. He'd captured everything: Maya setting a splint on a terrified spaniel's leg, her tearful reunion of a soaked tabby cat with its frantic owner, and, most damningly, the entire confrontation with Brenda Hoskins. He had edited the clips together with a raw, shaky immediacy, added a simple, powerful title, and uploaded it to the internet. The title was, "While the City Drowned, This Nurse Built an Ark." The video was electric. It was real, unpolished, and deeply human. It opened with a shot of Maya, her face pale with exhaustion, gently syringing water into a kitten's mouth. It cut to the chaos of the garage, then to a tearful owner hugging Maya after spotting their lost dog. And then came the centerpiece: Brenda Hoskins, clean and severe, lecturing an exhausted, mud-covered Maya about protocols and non-compliance. The contrast was devastating. It was a perfect, instantly understandable narrative, a selfless hero versus a heartless bureaucrat. The video didn't just get views, it detonated. It was shared by local news outlets, then by national animal rights groups, then by celebrities. Nurse Ark and Maya Torres started trending. A GoFundMe page that Leo had set up, initially to raise a few $100s for pet food, exploded with donations, the numbers climbing at a dizzying rate. Maya was oblivious to all of it. Her phone had died hours ago, and she was too busy managing a new crisis, a dwindling supply of antibiotics for a few animals with infected wounds, to even think about the outside world. She had become a viral sensation without ever knowing it. Her first clue that something had shifted was when a local news van pulled up to the curb. A reporter and a cameraman got out, approaching her with a mixture of reverence and urgency. "Maya Torres, we're from Channel 8 News. The whole country is talking about what you're doing here. Can you give us a comment on the city's attempts to shut you down?" Maya stared at them, confused. The whole country? Before she could process it, another van arrived. And another. Suddenly, her quiet, residential street was a media circus. The cameras and microphones created a protective barrier of public opinion around her, but they also painted an even larger target on her back. For people like Brenda Hoskins, Public defiance was a challenge that could not go unanswered. The climax arrived not with the roar of floodwaters, but with the low, menacing rumble of diesel engines. 3 large white animal control trucks turned onto her street, their official seals gleaming. They parked in a formidable line, blocking the road. Brenda Hoskins emerged from the lead vehicle, no longer alone. She was flanked by 4 animal control officers and, bringing up the rear, Sergeant Miller, his face grim. He avoided Maya's gaze. Mr. Henderson stood on his porch, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. This was it, the reckoning. Miss Torres. Brenda's voice was amplified by a small bullhorn, a ridiculous piece of theater for the assembled news crews. This property has been declared a temporary public health hazard under County Code 7.4. We have a legally executed order to impound all animals on the premises for evaluation and processing. She held up a piece of paper, the official stamp clearly visible. It was a declaration of war. The animal control officers began to advance, carrying nets and catch poles. The air grew thick with tension. The animals in the garage, sensing the shift, began to grow restless, a chorus of anxious whines and growls rising. Maya was running on nothing. Her body screamed for sleep, for food, for a moment of peace. Everything in her wanted to collapse. But as she saw the officers advancing on the sanctuary she had bled for, something inside her solidified. It was the same instinct that had sent her into the floodwater for Charlie the Beagle. She walked to the end of her driveway and stood there, her small frame the only thing between the officers and the garage. She held up her hands. "Stop," she said. Her voice was quiet, hoarse, but it carried an undeniable authority that made the advancing officers hesitate. The news cameras zoomed in, capturing the raw emotion on her face. "You want to talk about health hazards?" she said, her voice growing stronger, fueled by a righteous fire. "I have spent the last 72 hours cleaning wounds, treating infections, and preventing hypothermia. The only hazard here is your indifference, your paperwork, your protocols that would have let these animals die alone in the dark." She pointed a trembling finger at the trucks. "You see cages. I see family members. You see assets to be processed. I see heartbeats. This is Scooter, whose family lost their entire house but only cared that he was safe. This is Daisy, who kept a scared, elderly woman company for 8 hours on a rooftop. They aren't just animals, they're survivors. They deserve compassion, not confiscation." A small crowd of neighbors and volunteers had gathered. Hearing her words, they began to move, drawn by her raw courage. Mrs. Gable came and stood beside her. Leo stood on her other side. The owners who had been reunited with their pets joined them. Within moments, a silent, determined human chain had formed behind Maya, a wall of ordinary people against the unyielding force of the state. Brenda's face was a thundercloud of fury. "I have an order! You are obstructing a lawful operation!" she yelled into the bullhorn. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, placing himself between Brenda and Maya's human wall. His face was set, his decision made. "Brenda, hold on," he said, his voice low but firm. "Sergeant, do your duty," she snapped. Miller looked at Maya, at the crowd, at the news cameras broadcasting this standoff to the entire nation. He knew he was at a crossroads. He could follow the letter of the law, or he could honor its spirit. He lifted his radio to his mouth. "Dispatch, this is Miller at 412 Oakcrest. The situation here is escalating. We have significant public and media presence. I'm advising the chief that executing this order right now would be a significant public relations risk. I'm recommending we stand down pending a full review." He was giving his superiors an out, framing it in the language of risk management they would understand. But everyone there knew what he was doing. He was choosing a side. "What are you doing?" Brenda hissed, her voice losing its amplified authority. "My job," Miller said calmly, "which right now is de-escalation." He turned to Maya. "Ma'am, no one is taking your animals today." A collective sigh of relief went through the crowd, followed by a sudden, explosive eruption of cheers and applause. Brenda Hoskins, utterly defeated and publicly humiliated, glared at Maya with pure venom before turning sharply and marching back to her truck. The animal control officers, looking relieved, followed her lead. Mr. Henderson's smug grin had vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief before he scurried back into his house, slamming the door. As the trucks rumbled away in retreat, Maya finally felt her legs give out. The adrenaline that had sustained her for 3 days evaporated in an instant. Leo and Mrs. Gable caught her before she could fall. She had won. The Ark was safe. In the week that followed, the world shifted on its axis for Maya Torres. The story of the Standoff at Oak Crest became a national symbol of compassion versus bureaucracy. Donations poured into Leo's GoFundMe, surpassing $500,000. A local businessman, moved by the story, donated the use of a clean, empty warehouse as a temporary shelter, and a legion of volunteers helped move all 73 animals. A stray calico had given birth overnight into the spacious, safe new location. The city, facing a tidal wave of bad press, quietly dropped any notion of pressing charges. Maya was hailed as a hero, but the core anxieties of her life remained. The media attention was fading, and while the animals were safe for now, the red-stamped letters were still waiting for her on the kitchen counter. The crushing weight of her debt was a chronic condition, a reality that no amount of public praise could cure. She spent her days coordinating veterinary care at the warehouse, and her nights wrestling with the familiar dread of her financial ruin. One afternoon, a courier delivered a crisp, cream-colored envelope to her door. It was from a prestigious downtown law firm, the kind of place she imagined only existed in movies. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. A lawsuit. From the city for defying an order, or maybe from Henderson for property devaluation, or from Brenda for defamation. Her hands, so steady when setting a splint or calming a frightened animal, trembled as she sliced it open with a kitchen knife. Inside was a single sheet of thick, watermarked paper. The language was dense and formal. Dear Miss Torres, this firm represents a private philanthropic foundation. The foundation's benefactor, who wishes to remain anonymous but has asked to be referred to simply as a friend of Buster, was profoundly moved by your recent selfless actions on behalf of the animal community of Port Blossom during the recent catastrophic flooding. Our client believes that individuals who demonstrate such extraordinary character and compassion should not be burdened by financial hardship. We have therefore been instructed to act on your behalf. As of 3:00 p.m. EST today, our foundation has contacted and remitted payment in full for all outstanding debts associated with your name and social security number. This includes 1. Federal Student Loan Account, NPR 48B 2,291, 112, 480, 3.27. 2. Port Blossom General Hospital, Account 74B 912, Eleanor Torres, 61, 844.92. 3. All revolving credit accounts listed on your consumer credit profile. The total remitted amount is $188,721.44. Your current balance on all aforementioned accounts is 0. Please accept this as a gesture of profound respect and gratitude for your service to the community. We wish you a future as bright and unburdened as you deserve. Sincerely, Crawford, Baines, Associates. Maya read the letter once, then twice. The words swam before her eyes, nonsensical strings of letters. It felt like a dream, a cruel and impossible joke. She stumbled to her laptop, her fingers fumbling as she logged into her student loan portal, a website she normally avoided like a plague. For years, the homepage had been dominated by a huge, terrifying number in red. Now it read, current balance 0. She clicked over to her credit card account. Current balance 0. A sound escaped her throat, a choked sob that was half gasp, half laugh. The weight, the colossal, soul-crushing weight that had dictated every decision she'd made in her adult life, the weight that had kept her awake at night and defined her future as a narrow, dark tunnel, it was gone. It had simply vanished. She slid down the kitchen wall until she was sitting on the floor, the letter clutched in her hand. Buster, sensing her overwhelming emotion, came and rested his head in her lap. She buried her face in his scruffy fur, and for the first time in a decade, she wept tears not of stress or grief, but of pure, unadulterated relief. The kind of relief that felt like breathing after being held underwater for too long. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. An internal review, prompted by scathing media coverage, led to Brenda Hoskins being publicly reassigned to a windowless office in the County Archives Department, a bureaucratic exile. Mr. Henderson, ostracized by the entire neighborhood for his spectacular lack of empathy during a crisis, put a "for sale" sign on his perfectly manicured lawn 2 weeks later. The story of the mystery donor reignited public interest, and the GoFundMe, now managed by a proper nonprofit board, swelled to over $1 million. It was more than enough to buy and renovate a permanent facility. 6 months later, Maya stood on a sun-drenched patch of land, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the oak trees. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. She wasn't wearing scrubs but a simple dress, her face relaxed and glowing with a calm confidence that had been absent for years. Beside her, Buster sat proudly, his tail thumping a steady rhythm against the dirt. A sign stood on an easel, covered by a silk cloth. Maya walked up to the podium, looking out at the crowd of volunteers, veterinarians, and community members who had gathered. When the flood came, I felt like I was drowning in more ways than one, she said, her voice clear and strong. But you all, this community, you threw me a lifeline. You showed me that even in the darkest times, compassion is the light that guides us home. She pulled the cord, and the cloth fell away, revealing the sign's elegant script, the Torres Hope Sanctuary, in honor of Maya Torres and a friend of Buster. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya smiled, a real, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. She was no longer just an ER nurse struggling to stay afloat. She was the director of a sanctuary, a leader, a testament to the fact that one small act of courage could change everything. She was finally free, building her own ark on solid ground, ready for a future that was no longer a debt to be paid, but a promise to be fulfilled.